Hello, my name is Kate Stallard and this is my presentation for Wildlife and Habitat Management. It's the impacts on British wildlife and conservation strategies, and my chosen species is the European otter. So the purpose of this presentation is to look at the European otter, to consider the human impact on the species, and also to look at conservation efforts, including the relevant legislations and the relevant organisations involved. The decline of the otter was first noticed by otter hunters in about the 1950s, where they noticed basically the lack of otters that they were catching. It can be looked back quite accurately at records due to otter hunts such as the Wye Valley otter hounds, because they kept good records of what they caught, etc. So otter hunting then ceased in 1978, that was following its legal protection being granted. And following that, national surveys were then initiated to assess the situation of the European otter. So this table here shows the results of various otter surveys that were carried out. In 1977 to 1978 was the first one. Only 6% of possible sites were actually found to be active. 10 years on for that, numbers had increased to 10%. And then in the 1990s, it was found that in places such as the western sides of England, some of the sites had actually quadrupled in occupation. But in other areas such as East Anglia, numbers initially went down following the protection, but then increased and caught up with the various other places within the country due to the reintroduction of otters by the Otter Trust. Most recent results are sort of 2009 to 2010, and we're up to 59% of sites being actually active. The cause of the decline of the otter could be down to many things: habitat destruction, disturbance, road casualties, accidental deaths by caught in traps, severe weather conditions, diseases and pollution. The human population growth has had a massive impact on wildlife generally. As you can see from this graph, which shows you how the population has grown, over 2 billion people were estimated to be here only a few hundred years ago, and that suddenly swelled enormously to about 6.5 billion recorded in 2005. And a very similar curve you can see for the population growth in England and Wales. Again, it's just been a massive surge of the amount of people that we have in this country. And the resulting impact there is that there is increased need on energy, non-renewable and renewable resources, and an increase in demand for food production, again, so ultimately increasing food agriculture. Consequences of increasing population: increased transport links, increased development, that's urban, industrial and agricultural, which this ultimately results in fragmentation of the habitat for the otter. Isolated populations are then created, and you have the risk of inbreeding, which then also restricts the genetic biodiversity within that population. Destruction of the riparian habitat, which otters require, pollution into the watercourses, which we'll touch on a bit more, and the fatalities from vehicle collisions. Agriculture is the world's largest industry. It employs more than 1 billion people globally, and in the UK over 660,000 people are employed within the industry. 70% of UK land is agricultural. And in 1947, you saw the introduction of the Agricultural Act. So in the 1960s, following on from World War II, there was an increased need basically on agricultural needs for food production, which then saw a change in farming practices and more of the introduction of pesticides and fertilisers to increase yields. And then in the 2000s, again, agriculture is changing. There is an increased awareness of welfare, and the relevant legislations have been updated. Organic production is increasing, and the more and more updated and introduction of conservation directives. So agricultural impacts, so changes on how we practice farming and what the impact is on that on wildlife. We've got various selections here, and I've highlighted the ones that would have a natural impact on the European otter. So fragmentation results in loss of habitat. Pond infilling, again, loss of habitat for the otter. Fertiliser applications, a reduced vegetation diversity, decline in watercourse quality, which is very important for the needs of the otter. Pesticide application, direct toxicity on the otter, and the lethal and sublethal doses of this toxicity. This is on raptors, but we can link that very closely to the otters. Raptor populations dramatically declined about the same time as the otter. There was a lot of research that went into this. The cause was found to be the introduction of organochloride pesticides in about the 1950s, and this was for cereal seed dressings and sheep dips. Examples of including these dieldrin, eldrin, and DDT. Basically, the result of the use of these pesticides is the runoff would then end up into watercourses, and also from the use of sheep dip effluent again would then end up into river courses. And then basically what happens then is that it infects lower down in the food chain. So this is a diagram of biomagnification, which over 4 trophic levels of a food chain, and this example is looking at DDT. Basically we have where DDT, all the pesticide, is consumed by at the bottom level here in the primary consumers, and as we go up to the food chain, the accumulation of the chemical actually increases. So by the time you get to the top predator there, the result could be 400-fold increase in the concentrations of that pesticide, and that could have very fatal results. Basically, the result of it accumulating is the fact that it's not metabolised within the system as quickly as other nutrients. So the impact of organochloride pesticides, again, that we said was evident in the peregrine falcon. The research ruled out weather or food supply as the causes of this, and they decided that it was due to the accumulation of organochloride residues, which led to breeding failure, which resulted basically in very thin eggs, shells on eggs, which meant that very poor reproduction results. PCPs normally used and found in the environment as mixtures of several compounds with differing levels of toxicity, and this one's noted for effects on vitamin A metabolism, and they can relate this to the otter, saying basically in areas where PCB is lower, the otters thrive, and then where the PCB results have been higher, that is where the otter populations have declined. Different types of pollutants.